the Pokemon series. A series famous for, well, a lot of things, but mainly most well known for its sheer amount of colorful and collectible pocket monsters. With the series turning 30 next year and it being currently in its 9th generation of Pokemon, needless to say, there have been a ton of mons added since that original 151, with each and every single one of them managing to hold a special place in players' hearts. Except for maybe like Heatran. Although, while most, if not every single Pokemon has at least one person out there who appreciates it more than others, there are definitely some Pokemon who seem to stand above the rest when it comes to popularity. But on that topic of popularity, it does make you wonder, just how popular is each and every Pokemon? Like, okay, I think we all know one particular Pokemon's popularity is clearly far and above the rest, but where does everyone else stack up relative to each other? Now, sure, fan polls and the like do exist, but what if we wanted to see something a little more concrete? Like, how the actual guys who make these video games view and use their creations. What if we take a look at each and every Pokemon game that features huge swaths of playable Pokemon and see which ones they decided to cherry pick for each multiplayer occasion? And then detail, count up, compare, and contrast just how many times they've appeared. Almost like an every single appearances video, wow. As I said before, Pokemon is a series famous for its sheer amount of playable characters. What is it at this point? Like 1,025? Making this not only the biggest cast of characters we've done for one of these by a wide margin, but truly one of the most complicated I think I'll ever do. Please let this be the most complicated I ever do. Don't send me back to the mines. Okay, but how the hell are we gonna do this? Well, we might as well just start with the ground rules. Usual affair here. We are specifically looking at Pokemon titles that feature a large cast of playable characters, or I guess in this case Pokemon, that you get to choose from, that you can use to face off against other human players, whether it be in a puzzle game, fighting game, party game, battling game, you get the picture. As I feel, these types of games have the fairest chances of pretty much anyone from a series being chosen to be playable. And this distinction also helps keep these videos within a reasonable scope. And of course, with Pokemon's major focus on not just trading, but battling Pokemon between other players, a lot of Pokemon games are present. Pretty much all the mainline titles and a healthy amount of spin-offs to boot. At first I was considering doing something with specifically picking only games where you play as Pokemon as opposed to controlling them as a trainer, but that felt too cop-outy and got a little too existential for my liking, so we're just keeping it simple. But honestly though, despite how overwhelming this video has been to put together, I can't help but feel a little let down by how many games are actually on this list. Despite battling being a big feature in Pokemon, some of Pokemon's spin-offs I was kinda actually looking forward to covering don't actually have any head-to-head multiplayer. Like the Pokemon Rumble games that feature entire generations of mons and feature arenas where you battle against giant mosh pits of CPUs. Sure, they have co-op, but no PvP. The Mystery Dungeon and Ranger games don't feature any PvP. There's some arcade games that started out as mainly PvP experiences, but ditched that concept as their games went on. A puzzle game spin-off where the Pokemon are instead the puzzle pieces than anything you can play as. A couple racing titles and mini-game collections that seem perfect for this type of video until you realize that the only playable character is Pikachu. And dude, my goat, Poke Park Wii, a game where big chunks of it revolve around you competing in mini games with huge casts of characters with all their own fun little quirks, doesn't actually have any multiplayer to speak of. And then the sequel comes around and does add multiplayer, but you can only play as like 4 Pokemon and they all play the exact goddamn same. Pretty disappointing. But, you know, maybe this was fortunate because this was still a pain in the ass to make, so I should probably just count my blessings. Okay, but into the more specific rules. First off, they have to be, well, playable or controllable Pokemon, not represented through cards or medallions or chess pieces or any other weird inanimate crap. Then, in the cases of spin-offs or games where a Pokemon appear as guest characters, like Smash Brothers, the game needs to be at least a 50-50 split between the focus characters and whatever they're crossing over with, which Pokemon has none, so yeah, not counting Smash Brothers or anything. Oh, also on the topic of Smash Brothers, the Pokeball item isn't going to be counted either. You don't control them at all, you just set them free and they just go. I feel like I'd get some sort of comment about that, so I'm just clarifying. Then, what I will only be counting as separate Pokemon are what the Pokédex itself considers separate Pokemon. So even if a game has, like, specifically Galarian Rapidash, Arceus Bug, or Pikachu Libre, those will only be counted under Rapidash, Arceus, and Pikachu. Look, the dex doesn't make the distinction, so neither will I. Blame Professor Oak, not me. And like I said, huge swaths of characters, like at least 4. And also, the games have to let you choose which characters you get to play as, like a real character select screen or something like that. And I probably shouldn't have to say this, but I'm gonna say it anyway. We're only looking at official Pokemon games, so no ROM hacks or fan games or anything of the like. And this is more of a disclaimer than a rule, but also consider this more a highly accurate overview of the characters playable, but not like a definitive 100% factual list or anything. Not only because this list will probably be outdated within a week with how Pokemon pumps out its content, but also like I'm just one guy putting this together. Sometimes mistakes slip through the cracks. And hey, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to, you know, like, maybe even subscribe if you're feeling crazy. And by the way, if you actually want to get your hands on the data I compiled to make this video, you know, to compile the information for yourself, add a disqualified game that you wish I had included anyway, help keep track of appearances through future releases or whatever the heck people do with data sheets, consider taking a trip down to my Patreon. Patrons not only get access to this video a day early, but they also get access to the data sheets I use to create this video and many others, as well as other fun perks. But hey, enough shilling, let's get on with the video. So, before we get into the actual counting, first we have to break down just a couple of things. First, starting with the games that exist that I can't actually count. And not because of the rules or whatever. No, there are Pokemon titles out there that do fit the bill for one of these videos, but they just have so little info out there about them. They're so obscure that I just have nothing. I literally have no goddamn idea on which Pokemon are even in them. Weirdly enough, they're all LCD games too. Starting with the Pokemon Cyber Pokeball and Cyber Pokedex. Yes, you can battle on both the Pokeball and the Pokedex. Like, I know that there are Pokemon in there, and I know you can actually battle other people on them, but no one has actually ever documented catching them all. Like, I see the box says 105 Pokemon, but which ones, man? And then we even have a separate LCD handheld game, being the Cyclone 2, with an even weirder story. Basically, the Pokemon were released on these little plastic discs, kind of like an earlier version of Toys to Life or those e-reader games, I guess. And it claims, oh, battle and catch over 150 Pokemon. But the catcher is, this thing wasn't very popular, so nobody knows if the whole series of Mons even got released. Okay, but let's actually start getting into something actually solid. Before we can get into the real nitty-gritty individual count-up of the playable Mons, we're gonna have to start a little more general. with the Gen overview. Basically, the way I've categorized it, there are two categories of Pokemon games. Pokemon games that neatly hold a set amount of gens, and Super Cancer. So the way I'm treating this is we'll just go over all the games that fit the gens neatly first, and they'll act as sort of modifiers to each specific gen when it comes to totaling up their games. Like for instance, starting with Gen 1. The gen to start it all, unsurprisingly, manages to have all its mons appear in most games on this list, featuring them in 26 total games. The mainline games, including the Japanese exclusive version of the originals, because apparently people treat those as different games, I don't know, the Pokemon Stadium / Coliseum titles, and Pokemon Go. Following that, Gen 2 only manages to feature in 20, so Gen 2 Pokemon only get a plus 20 modifier, and then Gen 3 only manages to appear in 17, Gen 4 and 11, Gen 5 and 7, Gen 6 and 4, and Gen 9 in just 1. Yes, you heard that right. Gens 7 and 8 don't make a full appearance in any title in the series, even the ones where they originate from. Well, how could this happen? Well, you see, that's a funny story. With Gen 7, well, okay, they made Sun and Moon, right? But then they made Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, which decided, you know, to throw out a couple new mons to make the entry special, but kind of forgot to let you be able to trade those guys back to the original Sun and Moon. So that's already kind of messed up. But now I know you're asking, okay, well, why don't the Ultra games have a complete Gen 7 dex? This gooey little fucker right here. And we'll talk about him when we get to him, but he messed up the whole thing. And also coupled by the fact that this was right before the Dexit titles rolled around, and yeah, they never stood a chance. And then Gen 8 did a similar thing by introducing Mons into a spin-off game, and just like Sun and Moon, didn't let them be backwards compatible, so that situation's also kind of messed up. Okay, so now you think we could get started, huh? Oh, no. We've still got a couple of stragglers to deal with. Oh wait, this isn't actually a Pokemon. This list starts with Pokemon Puzzle League, a game heavily based off not just the anime, but also the Pokemon movie from around that time. The one with Mewtwo in it that made me bawl like a child when I was, well, a child. And a movie that happens to feature these little goblins. The weird Mewtwo clone Pokemon, Clone Bulbasaur, Clone Charmander, and Pikachu 2. Really? Pikachu was right there, whatever. Anyway, these things are an affront to God and not officially recognized as a living species by any governments, so these guys are kind of outliers. Also, another special thing borrowed from the anime in this game are the Pokemon Sparky, Zippo, and Happy, specially named Pokemon owned by the character Richie. Now, these are just a Pikachu with weird hair and a regular Charmander and Butterfree, but they are the only Pokemon to get special names, so I thought I'd mention them at least. And for our last stop, we have Pokken Tournament, the only one Pokemon fighting game. And of course, what's a fighting game without a fucked up final boss hopping off some weird evil goo energy? And for that, we have Shadow Mewtwo. I mean, yeah, you could argue this falls within the classifications of the other Shadow Pokemon, but like, bro's got a yellow chunk of cheese growing out of his collarbone. That's gotta be something, right? Though by that logic, I should probably also throw out Shadow Lugia, but hell, I basically just did that by even saying his name. You're welcome. Okay, but now it's time to actually start counting these guys down. Of course, starting off, we have the Mons from Generation 9, aka the Pokemon only playable currently in Scarlet and Violet. We have the Pokemon Tarantula, Spidops, Squawkabilly, Knackley, Knacklestack, Gargancle, Wattrill, Kilowattrill, Mastiff, Mabostiff, Bramblin, Bramblegast, Toadscool, Toadscruel, Cloth, Capsicid, Scovillain, Rellor, Rabsca, Flittle, Espathra, Finizen, Palafin, Cyclizar, Orthworm, Glimmet, Glamora, Flamigo, Veluza, Dodonzo, Tatsugiri, Farigiraffe, Dudunsparce, Kingambit, Great Tusk, Screamtail, Brute Bonnet, Fluttermane, Slitherwing, Sandy Shocks, Iron Treads, Iron Bundle, Iron Hands, Iron Jugulus, Iron Moth, Iron Thorns, Wo-Chen, Chen Pao, Tingaloo, Chi-Yu, Roaring Moon, Iron Valiant, Koraidon, Walking Wake, Iron Leaves, Diplin, Poltergeist, Sinistra, Okidogi, Monkey Dory, Fazandipity, Ogrepawn, Archulodon, Hydrapple, Gouging Fire, Raging Bolt, Iron Boulder, Iron Crown, Terapagos, and Pecharunt. Already starting off with a big one, huh? Then we have the Gen 8 one-timers, only playable in Sword and Shield, with Blipbug, Dottler, Orbeetle, Nickit, Thievul, Yamper, Boltund, Sizzlipede, Centiskorch, Clobopus, Grapploct, Dracozolt, Arctozolt, Dracovish, and Arctovish. And our only Gen 8 outlier is Basculegion, a Legends Arceus Mon that's only usable in Scarlet and Violet. Starting with the two-timers now, and again, starting with Gen 9, with Mons only playable in SV as well as Go. We have Fuecoco, Crocolore, Skeledurge, Quaxley, Quaxwell, Quaquaval, Lechonk, Oinkalog, Nimble, Lokix, Pawmi, Pawmo, Pawmot, Tandemouse, Mousehold, Fido, Dachshund, Smoliv, Dolliv, Arboliva, Tadbulb, Bellybolt, Shroodle, Grafefe, Wiglet, Wugtrio, Bombardier, Varoom, Revavroom, Grievard, Houndstone, Katahdle, Katitan, Annihilape, Clodsire, Frigibax, Arctibax, Baxcalibur, Gimmighoul, and Goldango. And then the ones who didn't make it into Go, but did make it into Pokemon Unite, the Pokemon League of Legends like, are Tinkatink, Tinkatuff, Tinkaton, and Miraidon. Then we head back to Gen 8 for its two-timers, where we have Wooloo, Dubwool, Obstagoon, Cursola, Sirfetch'd, Mr. Rhyme, and Runerigus. Playable in Sword and Shield, but also made it into Pokemon Go. Followed by the Mons who instead opted to be in Scarlet and Violet with Chewtle, Dreadnought, Roly-Poly, Carkol, Colossal, Applin, Flapple, Appleton, Silicobra, Sandaconda, Arrokuda, Barraskewda, Impidimp, Morgrim, Grimmsnarl, Milkray, Alcremie, Pinchurin, Snom, Frostmoth, Eiscue, Indeedee, Cufant, Copperaja, Eternatus, Glastrier, Spectrier, and Calyrex. And then the Gen 8ers hailing from Legends Arceus, only playable in Go and SV, with Weirdeer, Cleavor, Ursaluna, Sneasler, Overquill, and Enamorus. And then to cap it off, we have Gossifleur and Edelgoss, only playable in Sword and Shield, but also in Pokemon Unite. Three-timers, where we finally end off Gen 9. The Mons lucky enough to make their way into Pokemon Unite with Sprigatito, Floragato, Meowscarada, Charcadet, Armarouge, and Ceruledge. Then, quickly back to the Gen 8ers in SNS, SNV, and Go, with Grookey, Thwackey, Rillaboom, Rookidee, Corvisquire, Corviknight, Toxel, Toxtricity, Sinistea, Poltergeist, Hatina, Hatrim, Hatrine, Berserker, Stonejourner, Morpeko, Zamzenta, Zarude, Regieleki, and Regidrago. Then the three-time Gen 8ers, not in Go, but in Unite, with Cramorant, Cubfu, Duraludon, and Urshifu. Now, finally on to Gen 7. With its least popular Mons, we have Wishiwashi, Pyukumuku, Dhelmise, Type Null, and Silvally, only usable in Sun, Ultra Sun, and Sword and Shield. And swap out that SNS for an SNV, and you have Minior. Then we have the Ultramons, who made it into SNS and Go with Poipole, Nagandel, Stakataka, Blacephalon, and then the only non-Go Yes Scarlet outlier with Zeraora. Kinda fucked up, they literally named a Pokemon Zeraora. And then we have the biggest anomaly on this list. A Gen 8 Pokemon not even appearing in Sun and Moon with Meltan and its evolution Melmetal. Made original for Pokemon Go and also playable in Sword and Shield and Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee. 4 timers time with our final Sword and Shield Pokemon. Playable in all of Unite, Sword and Shield, SNV, and even Go, Scorbunny, Raboot, Cinderace, Sobble, Drizzly, Inteleon, Squavette, Greedent, Phalanx, Dreepy, Dracloak, Dragapult, and Zacian. Then we go back to the Sun and Moon Mons, with the ones in Go and Sword and Shield with the Morlul, Shiinotic, Stuffle, Beware, Wimpod, Goliciopod, Turtonator, Togedemaru, Tapu Koko, Tapu Lele, Tapu Bulu, Tapu Fini, Nihilego, Pheromosa, Xurkitree, Celesteela, Kartana, Guzzlord, Marshadow, and Drampa. And we even have some ones in Scarlet and Violet instead, with Pikapeck, Trumpbeak, Toucanon, Yungoos, Gumshoes, Crabrawler, Crabominable, Oricorio, Komala, and Bruxish. And then finally the ones in SNS and SNV with Magierna. With the 5 timers, the only Sun and Moon Mon not in Scarlet and Violet, but instead in Unite, we have Buzzwole, and then another not in Go and making up the same spot with Unite with Mimikyu. And then you have the rest in all the big games so far, with Litten, Torracat, Incineroar, Poplio, Brionne, Primarina, Grubbin, Charjabug, Vikavolt, Cutiefly, Ribombee, Rockruff, Lycanroc, Marini, Toxapex, Dewpider, Araquanid, Fomantis, Lurantis, Salandit, Salazzle, Oranguru, Passimian, Sandygast, Palusand, Jangmo-o, Hakamo'o, Komo-o, Cosmog, Cosmium, Solgaleo, Lunala, Mudbray, Necrozma, and Mudsdale. And then we finally get to Gen 6, and finally a gen with some modifiers. Remember about the modifiers we talked about before? Where we have this gen's least popular mon, Furfrou, only being outside of its base modifiers in Scarlet and Violet. 6 timers with Sun and Moon are simple. In all the games we've talked about so far, except Let's Go, are Rowlet, Dartrix, Bounsweet, Steenie, Tsarina, and Comfey. Then for X and Y's 6 timers, our Sword and Shield / Go mons are Diggersby, Spritzee, Aromatisse, Slurpuff, Binacle, Barbacle, Tyrantrum, Aurorus, and Gourgeist. And Go and SV are Scatterbug, Spupa, Vivillon, Pyroar, Floette, Florges, and Go-Goat. And then we have Honedge and Doublade, not only in Scarlet and Violet, but also Pokemon Unite. And the only one in Sword and Shield and Scarlet and Violet is Volcanion. Already on to the 7 timers with our final and most popular Sun and Moon Mon with Decidueye, making it into most spin-offs available at the time. Then, back in X and Y, we get introduced to our first arcade title, Pokemon Tretta, with the mons playable in that alongside Go and SS with Bunnelby, Pancham, Pangoro, Swirlix, Helioptile, Heliolisk, Tyrant, Amora, Pumpkaboo, Xerneas, Yveltal, and Zygarde. And opting for Scarlet and Violet instead of Sword and Shield, we instead have the starter mons of Chespin, Quilladin, Chestnut, Litleo, Flabebe, and Skiddo. And then the ones not in Tretta, but other games, with Malamar, Skrelp, Clauncher, Bergmite, and Avalugg. And embarrassingly, embarrassingly, we also have our first Gen 5 Mons with Patrat and Watchog, not making it into a single Dexit game or spin-off title. Alright, X and Y 8-timers with Esper, Meowstic, Inkay, Dragalge, Clawster, Hawlucha, Dedenne, Carbink, Klefki, Noibat, Noivern, and Diancie, and the 4 now usual suspects. And trading out Sword and Shield for Unite is Fennekin, Delphox, Froakie, Frogadier, Greninja, and Hoopa. And then we have Aegislash, not in SV or Go, but in Unite and Pokken DX. And then finally, Fletchinder, Sliggoo, Phantump, and Trevenant, not in Treta, but in Unite as well. Now back to B&W, we have the Mons only in one game outside of their preset modifiers, with Lillipup, Herdier, Stoutland, Leopard, Pidove, Tranquil, Unpheasant, Woobat, Swoobat, Timepole, Palpitoad, Seismitoad, Thraw, Sock, Maractus, Sigilyph, Tortuga, Caracosta, Archon, Archeops, Trubbish, Garbodor, Vanillite, Vanillish, Carablast, Frillish, Jellicent, Ferroseed, Ferrothorn, Kling, Elgium, Beheum, Shelmet, Buffalant, Heatmore, and Durant in Sword and Shield. With Swanna, Deerling, Sawsbuck, Alamola, Tynamo, Electric, and Electros in Scarlet and Violet, and fucking Simisage, Simisear, and Simipour in a brand new headache called Pokemon Conquest. Alright, and at the 9-timers, this is where the list takes a turn. It's just gonna be me going back and forth on the same handful of like 5 games where random globs of Pokemon are just split up for no real reason. So just a warning, I'm kind of just gonna blitz through this. Anyway, getting to the end of the Gen 6ers with their more popular Mons being Fletchling, Talonflame, Sylveon, Goomy, and Goodra in the Dexa titles Go, Treta, and Unite. And then for the 9-timers from Gen 5, we have Basculin, Solosis, Duision, Reniculus, Amoonguss, Cryogonal, Minefu, Mineshao, Golett, and Vullaby in Sword and Shield and Scarlet and Violet, Purloin, Yamask, Vanillux, Clink, Stunfisk, Druddigon, and Genesect in Sword and Shield and Treta, Blitzel, Zebstrika, Sewaddle, Swadloon, and Lavani in Scarlet, Violet, and Conquest, Roggenrola, Boldore, Venipede, and Whirlipede only in Sword and Shield and Conquest, Cofagrius and Klinklang only in Sword and Shield and a new arcade title, Botrio, Ducklet and Moletta only in Scarlet and Violet and Treta. In just Sword and Shield and Unite, we have Dwebble, and finally Pansear and Panpour only in Botrio and Conquest. And then we're sticking to the 10-timers through Gen 5. In Sword and Shield, Botrio, and Conquest, we have Musharna, Gigalith, and Scolipede. In Sword and Shield, Treta, and Unite, we have Crustle. In Sword and Shield, Scarlet and Violet and Unite, we have Zorua. In Sword and Shield, Botrio, and Treta, we have Victini, Excalibur, and Excelgor. In Scarlet, Violet, Treta, and Conquest, we have Servine, Pignite, and Duwat. In Botrio, Treta, Conquest, we have Pansage. In Sword and Shield, Scarlet, Violet, and Conquest, we have Timber, Girder, Cottony, Whimsicott, Petilil, Lilligant, Crookorok, Scrafty, Cinccino, Gothita, Gothorita, Joltik, Galvantula, Fracture, Cubchoo, Beartic, Pawniard, Rufflet, Zwellius, and Larvesta. In Sword and Shield, Treta, Conquest, we have Muna and Darumaka. And in Sword and Shield, Scarlet, Violet, and Treta, we have Fungus and Keldeo. And then on to the 11-timers. And for our final Gen 6er, and probably the strangest, most popular Pokemon of their gen, we have Braixen, a middle Evomon, serving as the most popular Pokemon of its gen, getting boosted up by appearing in every single Pokken title. Which, I mean, I guess isn't too weird because of Pikachu, but like some people consider like Pichu and like the other baby Pokemon like not first Evos and like a weird other thing, and also it's fucking Pikachu, so I feel like this is still a weird outlier. And then for the rest of the 11-timers in Gen 5, In Scarlet and Violet, the arcades and Conquest, we have Serperior, Emboar, and Samurott. In the Dexa games Tretta and Conquest, we have Drillbur, Conkeldurr, Sandile, Crocodile, Haxorus, and Dino. In Sword and Shield, the arcades and Conquest, we have Audino, Darmanitan, and Emolga. In the Dexic games Botrio Conquest, we have Minccino and Gothitelle. In the Dexits Conquest and Unite, we have Lampent. And in the Dexits and the arcades, we have Golurk, Mandibuzz, Cobalion, Virizion, Tornadus, Thundurus, Landorus, and Kyurem. At the 12 timers, and all the games we've been going over before, we have Excadrill, Scraggy, Axew, Bisharp, Braviary, Hydreigon, Volcarona, Terrakion, Reshiram, and Zekrom, though the only one making an appearance in Unite is Litwick, with the only Gen 5 Mon as the outlier being Zoroark, opting out of Tretta for Unite. And we also get the 3 base form starters, with Snivy, Tepig, and Oshawott appearing in the same games as their full Evos, with an extra slot in Pokepark 2 Wonders Beyond. And we finally get to Gen 4, with its least popular Mons being Burmy, Wormadam, Mothim, and Purugly, only appearing outside of its base 11 games in Pokemon Go. No Gen 5 13 timers, instead we have Gen 4, with Bidoof and Bibarel in Go and Conquest, Lopunny and Cherubi in Sword and Shield and Go, Kricketot, Finneon, Luminion, and Probopass in Scarlet and Violet and Go, Phion and Manaphy in Scarlet and Violet and Botrio, and Glammeow alone in both Go and Botrio. For the 14 timers, continuing on with Gen 4 in Scarlet, Violet, Go, and Botrio, we have Turtwig, Grotle, Kricketune, Cranidos, Rampardos, Pachirisu, Buizel, Floatzel, Ambipom, Honchkrow, Yanmega, Gliscor, and Shaman. In Sword and Shield Go and Botrio, we have Roserade, Cherim, Baniri, Mime Jr., Mantike, Licky, Tangrowth, and Togekiss. In the Dexits and Go, we have Shellos and Gastrodon. In Scarlet, Violet, Go, and Conquest, we have Chingling. In Go, Botrio, and Tretta, we have Chatot. And in Go, Botrio, and Conquest, we have Carnivine. And with the 15 timers, we have our final and most popular Black and White Mon with Chandelure. In the Dexit games, Go, Unite, and even some of the Pokens, but for some reason, only being in Tretta and not Botrio. Then back to Gen 4, in Scarlet, Violet, Go, and the arcade titles, we have Torterra. Trading out Tretta for Conquest, we have Chimchar, Monferno, Prinplup, Starly, Staravia, Staraptor, Shieldon, Bastiodon, and Mismagius. In Sword and Shield Go and the arcades, we have my favorite Pokemon, Budew. In the Dexits Go and Botrio, we have Vespiquen, Stunky, Stuntank, Bronzor, Bronzong, Bonsly, Happiny, Hippopotas, Hippowdon, Snover, Magnezone, Porygon Z, Uxie, Mesprit, Azelf, and Heatran. For Sword and Shield Go and Conquest, we have Scorpy and Drapion. Trading out Botrio for Scarlet and Violet, we have Frostlass. And then we have Arceus, being not just in Scarlet and Violet, but being in Botrio, Tretta, and Conquest. 16 timers, starting with Infernape and Piplup, who are in Scarlet and Violet, Go, the arcade titles, and Conquest. Then we have Shinx, Luxio, Drifblim, Munchlax, Toxicroak, Rhyperior, and Dusknoir, who are in Sword and Shield instead of Tretta. And trading out Conquest for Sword and Shield are Combee, Abomasnow, Electivire, Magmortar, Rotom, Palkia, Regigigas, Giratina, and Cresselia. And swapping out Botrio for Sword and Shield is Spiritomb. And then we finally have Mamoswine, who isn't in Tretta or Conquest, but is in Pokemon Unite. And for 17 timers and all the bullshit we've been talking about, we have Luxray, Drifloon, Riolu, Gallade, and Dialga. Though specifically trading out Tretta for Unite, we have Gible and Gabite. And before the 17 timers end, we finally get to our Gen 3 Pokemon. With our least popular Gen 3 Mons not getting anything past their multipliers, we have Wurmple, Silcoon, Beautifly, Cascoon, Dustox, Taillow, Delcatty, Spinda, Clamperl, Huntail, and Gorbis. I'm sorry, is that fish wearing a bra? Making 18 appearances, starting at Gen 4, in the Dexit games, Go, arcade games, Conquest, and Unite are Leafeon and Glaceon. Then we have Empoleon and Darkrai, both in a mishmash of bullshit, but both in Pokken for the arcade and Switch. Then we have our second least popular group of Gen 3 Mons, with Zigzagoon, Linoone, Ninjask, Whismur, Loudred, Exploud, Carvana, Wailord, Claydol, Lileep, Cradily, Castform, Wynot, and Relicanth, in Sword and Shield and nothing else. Followed by the Scarlet and Violet Mons, with Surskit, Masquerain, Mightyena, Shroomish, Breloom, Slackoth, Vigoroth, Slacking, Nosepass, Meditite, Medicham, Volbeat, Illumise, Swalot, Nummel, Camerupt, Grumpig, Cacturn, Shuppet, and Lovedisk, with Botrio alone having Swellow and Skitty, and Tretta alone having Kecleon. Gen 4 19 timers with only 2. Krogunk, who appeared in all the Dexits, Go, arcade titles, and Conquest, but only in the arcade and Switch versions of Pokken, and Weavile, who missed out on Tretta but was base roster for Pokken on the Wii U. And over at Gen 3, we're already getting into the convoluted meat of things. In Scarlet and Violet Botrio, we have Poochyena, Hariyama, Gulpin, and Cacnea. In the 2 Dexit games only, we have Lotad, Lombre, Ludicolo, Seedot, Nuzleaf, Shifttree, Pelipper, Shedinja, Azurill, Altaria, Barboach, Whiscash, Crawdont, and Feebas. In Sword and Shield and Tretta, we have Nincada, Sharpedo, Wailmer, and Lunatone. In Sword and Shield and Conquest, we have Aeron, Anorith, Armaldo, Spheal, and Walrein. In Sword and Shield and Botrio, we have Electrike, Roselia, and Baltoy. In Scarlet and Violet and Tretta, we have Spoink and Banette. And finally, in Scarlet and Violet and Conquest, we are left with Chimecho. No Gen 4 20 timers, so it's right back to Gen 3 hell. In the Dexits and Tretta, we have Mudkip, Marshtomp, Swampert, Swablu, and Corphish. In the Dexits and Botrio, we have Wingull, Torkoal, Trapinch, Vibrava, Flygon, Seviper, Shelgon, Regirock, and Regice. In the Dexits and Conquest, we have Glalie. In the arcades in Sword and Shield, we have Mawile, Manectric, and Solrock. Only in Sword and Shield, Tretta, and Conquest, we have Celio. In Sword and Shield Botrio and Conquest, we have Lairon. And in Scarlet and Violet in the arcades, we have Makuhita, Plusle, Minun, Zangoose, Tropius, and Deoxys. And right at the end, we finally get into Generation 2, with the most unpopular Gen 2 Mons being Lediba and Ledian. Sadly, at 21 appearances, we say goodbye to Gen 4. Available in all the extra stuff, we have Garchomp and Lucario, our most popular Mons for that generation. And back to Gen 3, starting with the Dexits and arcade games, we have Milotic, Bagon, Salamence, Latios, Kyogre, and Jirachi. In the Dexits, Tretta, and Conquest, we have Snorunt. In Sword and Shield, the arcades, and Conquest, we have Aggron. In the Dexits, Botrio, and Conquest, we have Duskull, Dusclops, and Registeel. In the Dexits, Conquest, and Unite, we have Kirlia. And in the arcades, Sword and Shield, and Pokemon Unite is Absol. And back to Gen 2, only in Sword and Shield, we have Natu, Xatu, Shuckle, Corsola, Remoraid, Mantine, Smoochum, and Miltank. Only in Scarlet and Violet, we have Furret, Spinarak, Ariados, Hoppip, Skiploom, Jumpluff, Apom, Sunkern, Sunflora, Girafarig, Snubbull, Granbull, Teddiursa, Ursaring, Houndour, Houndoom, Donphan, Stantler, and Smeargle. And only appearing in Pokemon Botrio is unknown. Now on to 22, starting over at Gen 3, with a bigger group here being the guys from the Dexits/Arcades and Conquest, with Trico, Gravile, Groudon, and Rayquaza. And then the other stragglers, with them being in Unite instead of Conquest, with Torchic, Combuskin, Blaziken, and Sableye, with our only outliers being Ralts and Metang. And back to Gen 2, oh boy, we've got a big whole mess here. And only just the Dexit games, we have Hoothoot, Noctowl, Chinchou, Lantern, Politoed, Slowking, Dunsparce, Quillfish, Kingdra, Tyrogue, and Hitmontop. In just Sword and Shield and Botrio, we have Togetic and Octillery. In just Sword and Shield and Tretta, we have Wobbuffet. In Sword and Shield and Conquest, we have Crobat. In Scarlet and Violet and Botrio, we have Bayleaf, Meganium, Quilava, Typhlosion, Croconaw, Feraligatr, Murkrow, Gligar, Slugma, Magcargo, and Phanpy. For Scarlet and Violet in Conquest, we have Flaffy, Pineco, and Forretress. And finally, I get to mention a different fucking game for what's been ages in Scarlet and Violet and Pokemon Puzzle Challenge for the Game Boy Color. Hallelujah, it's Sentret. Everyone say thank you, Sentret. 23 timers now, starting simple in Gen 3, and everything except Pokken, we have Beldum and Metagross. And then back to hell, I mean Gen 2, we have the Dexits and Puzzle Challenge with Cleffa and Blossom, in the Dexits and Unite with Azumarill, in the Dexits and Botrio with Delibird, Skarmory, and Porygon 2. Only in Sword and Shield in the arcades is Celebi. In Puzzle Challenge, Botrio, and SV, we have Chikorita, Cyndaquil, and Totodile. Scarlet and Violet, Tretta, and Conquest is Mareep and Ampharos. Scarlet Violet in the arcades is Yanma. And Scarlet and Violet, Botrio, and Conquest is Misdreavus. No 24s for Gen 3, so it's just Gen 2. For Dexits, Conquest, and Puzzle Challenge, it's Igglybuff. For the Dexits and the arcades, we have Sudowoodo, Heracross, Raikou, Entei, and Lugia. For the Dexits, Botrio, and Conquest, we have Looper, Quagsire, Sneasel, and Blissey. In just the Dexits, Botrio, and Unite, you have Swinub and Pillowswine. For the Dexits, Botrio, and Puzzle Challenge, we have Elekid and Magby. In the Dexits, Conquest, and Unite, we have Larvitar and Pupitar. And for our weird outliers, we have Togepi and Steelix. 25 now, back to Gen 3 with just one Mon, with Sceptile, only missing out on Unite. And Gen 2 is fortunately simple as well, with only the box art legendary Ho-Oh. And capping off Gen 3 at 26 total appearances, yeah, it's fucking Gardevoir. And we all know why. Oh, that's nasty. Now, back to Gen 2, nice and simple once again. In the Dexits, Arcades, Conquest, and Unite, we have Espeon, Umbreon, and Tyranitar. And then we have Marill, who also made it into Unite, and even a whole new game for this list, Pokemon Puzzle League. And swapping out Unite for Puzzle Challenge, we have Pichu. And then finally, in the home stretch, folks, we have made it to Generation 1. With its most unpopular mons, Weedle, Kakuna, Pidgey, Rattata, Raticate, and Spearow. Crazy that some Gen 2 and even Gen 3 mons got as many appearances as the most famous Route 1 Pokemon of all time. That's pretty wild. And without any Gen 2 27 timers, let's focus back on Gen 1, with Caterpie, Metapod, Butterfree, Nidorina, Nidoran Male, and Nidorino only found elsewhere in Sword and Shield, Paras, Parasect, Mankey, Victreebel, Graveler, Seal, Grimer, Muck, and Drowsy in Scarlet and Violet, and then Pidgeotto and Botrio, Pidgeot in Tretta, and Fearow in our final new game, Pocket Monster Coliseum, the Japanese exclusive first game in the Coliseum series that only contained like less than half of the 151 playable. That's pretty weird, huh? And at 28 timers, we say goodbye to our final Gen 2 Mons, with the most popular being Skizor and Suicune, with them trading missing appearances in Wii U Pokken and Pokemon Conquest. Honestly, had no idea Suicune was this popular. And back to Gen 1, oh boy. In just the Dexit games, we have Oddish, Vileplume, Golduck, Poliwag, Tentacool, Tentacruel, Kingler, Execute, Hitmonlee, Lickitung, Seadra, Goldeen, Seaking, Ammonite, Omastar, Kabuto, and Kabutops. In Sword and Shield and Puzzle League, we have Nidoran Female. In Sword and Shield and Pokemon Monster Stadium, we have Nidoqueen. In Scarlet and Violet and Conquest, we have Ekans. In Scarlet and Violet and Puzzle League, we have Venonat, Venomoth, Weepinbell, Geodude, and Dugong. In Scarlet and Violet and Tretta, we have Bellsprout. Only in Scarlet and Violet and Unite is Doduo. And in Scarlet and Violet and Pokemon Monster Stadium, we have Golem and Electrode. 29 timers now. Oh god, this is becoming a real mess. In the Dexits and Unite, we have Clefable and Ninetales. In the Dexits and Botrio, we have Diglett, Marowak, and Porygon. In the Dexits and Tretta, we have Sandshrew, Farfetch'd, Shelder, and Coughing. In the Dexits and Puzzle League, we have Sandslash, Gloom, Krabby, Hitmonchan, and Weezing. In the Dexits and Pocket Monster Stadium, we have Executor, Starmie, Tauros, and Ditto. In Scarlet and Violet, Conquest, and Puzzle League, we have Arbok. In Scarlet and Violet Puzzle League and Pocket Monster Stadium, we have Primate and Hypno. In Sword and Shield, Pokemon Puzzle League, and Pocket Monster Stadium, we have Nidoking. In Scarlet and Violet, Tretta and Unite, we have Dodrio. And ending on a real freak, with none of the Dexits, just Tretta, Conquest, and Pocket Monster Stadium, it's fucking Beedrill. Gen 1 30 timers. Oh boy, here we go. Dexits, Tretta, and Pokemon Puzzle League is Kangaskhan, Horsey, and Staryu. Dexits, Conquest, and Unite is Wigglytuff. Dexits, Conquest, and Pokemon Puzzle League is Golbat, Persian, Poliwrath, and Abra. In Dexits, Botrio, and Conquest, it's Kadabra and Rhydon. In Dexits Conquest PMS, it's Cloyster. In the Dexits and Arcades, we have Cubone, Magnemite, and Electabuzz. In the Dexits Botrio PMS, we have Dugtrio and Pinsir. In Dexits Botrio Unite, we have Ivysaur, Wartortle, Ponyta, and Rapidash. In Dexits Tretta and PMS, we have Jinx and Aerodactyl. In Dexits Tretta and Unite, we have Clefairy and Mr. Mime. And for our only outlier, in just Scarlet and Violet, the Arcades, and Pokemon Puzzle League, we have Voltorb. 31 appearances. We're getting there. In the Dexits Arcades and PPL, we have Growlithe, Poliwhirl, Tangela, and Magmar. Trading out Puzzle League for Conquest, we have Rhyhorn. In the Dexits Tretta, Conquest, and Unite, we have Magikarp and Jigglypuff. And instead in PMS, we have Zapdos and Moltres. And instead in Unite, we have Slowpoke, Slowbro, and Mew. And in the Dexits, Botrio, Conquest, and PMS, we have Magneton. In the Dexits, Botrio, Conquest, and Unite, we have Machop, Dratini, Dragonair, Ghastly, and Haunter. Dexits, Botrio, PMS is Arcanine. Dexits Conquest PPL PMS is Alakazam. In the Dexits Tretta, Puzzle League, and Unite, we have Vulpix. And finally, Dexits Botrio Conquest PPL is Zubat. 32 timers. In the Dexits, Botrio, Puzzle League, Conquest, and Unite is Charmeleon. In the Dexits, Arcades, Conquest, and Unite, we have Charmander and Eevee. In the Dexits, Arcades, Unite, and PMS, we have Chansey and Venusaur. In the Dexits, Botrio, Conquest, Unite, and PMS, we have Raichu, Machoke, and Lapras. In the Dexits Arcades Conquest and PPL, we have Meowth. In the Dexits Arcades Unite PPL, we have Bulbasaur, Squirtle, and Psyduck. In the Dexits Arcades Conquest PMS, we have Vaporeon, Flareon, and Articuno. And in the Dexits Botrio Conquest PPL PMS, we have Onix. 33 timers now. We're getting really close here. In the Dexit games, arcade titles, Pokemon Unite, Pokken DX. And Pocket Monster Stadium, we have a Blastoise. In the Dexit's Arcades Conquest, Pokemon Puzzle League, and Pocket Monster Stadium, we have Jolteon. In the Dexit's Arcades Conquest Unite and Pocket Monster Stadium, we have Gyarados. And in the Dexit's Arcades Unite, Pokemon Puzzle League, and Pocket Monster Stadium, we have Snorlax and Dragonite. And here we are at the home stretch. At the 34 timers, just 6 Pokemon left, with our first one being Scyther, making it into Conquest, Puzzle League, Pocket Monster Stadium, and Pokemon Unite. Followed by the Pokemon I'm probably most surprised to see make it this far, Machamp. Missing out on Tretta in the puzzle games, he got his big boost by being base roster for Pokken. I never thought Machamp was that popular, but here we are. And for the first time in this entire list, we're actually skipping a number, going from 34 right to 36, where we have only 3 mods, with Charizard and Gengar making these same appearances, while Mewtwo swaps out a couple to appear in some puzzle games. And of course, at our big finale, at 39 appearances, being playable in every single Pokemon game, it's Pikachu. All that time and research just to come to the grand conclusion that Pikachu is the most popular Pokemon in the series. I have nothing to say. And that's it. That's the video. Thanks for watching. Honestly, I'd be surprised if anyone made it to the end of this, because that got a little ugly there, but hey, this is what the people voted for, and I'm more than happy to deliver. Once again, sorry if I mistype a Pokemon name, or get a name or date of any game wrong. I've gone over this video a couple times, but you know, somehow something always manages to slip through the cracks. Anyway, needless to say, I've got a much simpler appearances video topic in mind for our next video, but I hope you guys enjoyed. Once again, big thanks to my patrons, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.